Welcome back to the channel. This is Casuals. I'm Jin,
And I'm Saki.
and today's episode is Time We're Not Getting Back, Borderlands 3. And funny enough, Time We're Not Getting Back is a rather accurate statement with Borderlands 3. No, if you watched our past episodes of Time We're Not Getting Back, we would reminiscence of our fond memories for, the games that we played. In this case, they're not so fond.
They're just memories.
They're just memories. Whether they're good or bad, I don't know. But eh. So Borderlands 3. I guess we'll start with what your reaction was when you first heard Borderlands 3 being announced. What was your reaction to that?
Oh, I was excited for once I heard they were making a third game, I'm like, "Oh man, another game." Like Borderlands 2 was amazing. I'm ready. I was like, "Take my money. Just give me the game." And
And
then when the game came out, that was a whole different story.
for me, I think my reaction was, oh, like I didn't expect Borderlands 3. Because at that point it had been, I think, around 7 years, right? 7 years.
Something like that.
7 years before they announced the existence of Borderlands 3. And I think during that time, I was kind of like, I don't know the exact words. I think it might be, no, it's not privy. I was kind of like
Skeptical.
skeptical and optimistically cautious. I think was the better way of describing it because times has changed within the gaming industry, right? It is there's been tons of titles 7 years after Borderlands 2. 7 years is a long time for a lot of change, and there had been a lot of games that were hyped up and just absolutely flubbed, because too many promises, too many kind of like relying on the franchise, like the franchise name, and taking that goodwill and destroying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
And I think one of the most common ones was like Fallout. I think Fallout 76 came out just before, around the time that I think Borderlands 3 was announced. I might have thought. I think so. It's around the same time frame ish. I'm saying for one example. I'm not saying like it's the exact one where I went like, oh, like because of this I don't trust Borderlands 3. But I was just kind of cautious about it, just because game industries changed massively. A lot of games were a lot of flops, especially when there were like sequels. Oh, I think a good one was Halo 4.
Yeah, Halo 4. Uh, I was looking forward to that game too, but it wasn't as good as I thought it was gonna be.
Yes, I was very cautious, but because Borderlands was such a beloved game to both of us, really, we both love Borderlands too. Such a fun game, incredible game. Um, we were like, yeah. I was optimistic, and you were very excited, evidently. Um, and so the game releases. But before we even get to that, I got really alarmed when Gearbox announced that it would be exclusively released on, well, one Xbox and the Epic's Game Store. For those of you that don't know, I think Borderlands is typically, back then Borderlands 2 was typically exclusive to, I think, Xbox, right? I don't think it released on um
No, it was on PlayStation.
oh, it was on PlayStation. Okay, my bad. But okay, so I was confusing. I was confusing some other game, but basically Borderlands 3, at least, or 2, at least I know it was back then. We played on the Xbox 3 1 or 360.
It was the 360 because I didn't. No, that's a lie. I had PlayStations, but my family used those, and so I just had the Xbox.
Yeah, so we mainly played on the Xbox. I just associated it with as an Xbox game because back then me was dumb, and so um they announced. So obviously Borderlands 2 eventually had a PC port. I don't know if it came out on PC unreleased for Borderlands 2, but eventually it had a PC port and it was on Steam, right? And so I was kind of excited because they announced crossplay, right? They announced a whole bunch of things, right? And including one of them was crossplay, and I was like, that's cool. I'll be able to play with Taki then, right? But then they suddenly announced that it was gonna be on Epic's Game Store, and I was like, because back then Epic's Game Store with the rise of Fortnite had a bunch of capital, and they wanted to make their own game, like kind of like similar to Steam, what is known as like the universal or most common game platforms where people sell, make communities or have communities out there, mods, games, all sorts of stuff, programs, even programs. And Steam is known as like the premier or the biggest kind of like program platform for that, right? And so I thought it was going to be Steam, but they announced it was going to be exclusive on Epic Games, and I didn't really like Epic Games because there was a lot of issues with it, and there still is quite a bit of issues with it. And so I was like, gosh, how long is the exclusivity for? It was for 6 months, right? I'm like, well, I'm kind of turned off from buying the game because I don't really want to use the Epic Games platform. So I ended up never buying it when it was on Epic's Game Store. But you ended up playing it the day it came out.
Yeah, I had a pre-order set in already.
Yeah. And so I don't think I even asked you about what the game was like because I was looking forward towards the future of playing it together. And I think I remember asking you at one point, I think before I even bought the game, or something like that. I was like, "Oh, how's Borderlands 3?" And your reply was quite something.
Yeah, it was kind of unplayable really a day of release. So the Vault Hunters in that game, of course, there's a standard 4 characters. So I chose the character named Mose, and she had like an iron. It's called the Iron Bear, which is basically a mech suit, and that's her like ultimate ability thing. She just calls down or she doesn't even call it in. It just like phases out of nowhere, and you just climb in, and you're controlling this mech. It was so bad that once you face the first like named mini boss kind of thing, it got instantly deleted. It lasted like maybe 30 seconds and then it just died, and it did very little damage. Like I think without using it, just normal guns would have done more damage. It was bad. The game was super unbalanced. I don't think they knew it. I think they released it too quickly because man, I think it was Flack as well in the beginning. Your little monster like
Pets.
partner pets. Yeah, they didn't do anything either. It was just bad.
Yeah, you said that you were just not enjoying the game at all.
Yeah, I actually played it like once I first got it. I was like, oh man, I popped the disc in, I started playing it. Like 20 minutes in, I'm like, yeah, I can't play this game anymore. It's until they start patching it and fixing it up, this game is literally, to me, it was unplayable.
Hmm. And you did eventually finish the campaign, right?
Yeah, I completed it, but this was like, you know, months later once they started patching it and balancing it. I did eventually beat the game with every character, but holy smokes, it was painful.
And so how I started playing Borderlands 3 was actually a different way. I actually did not play with you initially because the reason why that happened was because another group of friends of mine wanted to play Borderlands 3. They didn't ever play Borderlands 2. They never played Borderlands 1. They had no idea what Borderlands was all about, and so they just started playing Borderlands 3 for some weird reason.
Big mistake.
It was a big mistake. I will tell you that right now. So they started playing, and we only got to like I think 1/4 of the campaign, and they got bored. They were just insanely bored of the game. They were just like, what is this game, right? It's like not even fun, right? It's not what they imagined it to be. And they ended up quitting. And then I eventually hit up Saki, right? I was like, hey, do you want to play together? And we were like, sure. And we ended up playing together, and we only got through like maybe halfway at most.
The story just got too cringy. It was just so much cringe. I couldn't take it anymore.
We will eventually get to that. Yeah, the story was oh god. But yeah, we just did not. I don't think even together we even finished Borderlands 3. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, I don't think we ever completed a full campaign.
And I don't think we ever will. It's just
Probably not.
that bad. And so we're kind of like, taking a dunk on this game. By all means, it's a decent game. Um, but if you compare it to its predecessor, Borderlands 2, it is pales in comparison. Heavily pales in comparison. And so I guess we'll start talking about what we think went wrong, right? What do you think started going wrong, or what do you think was wrong with the game in terms of like, what aspect do you think the most, like, kind of like a disappointing aspect of the game was there?
Um, to me, I think the most, I wouldn't say disappointing, but most annoying to me was the story.
Hmm.
Like I liked the gameplay. It was, it's like the other Borderlands games. I did like how they added the like the ledge grab climb thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a good addition because in Borderlands 2 you couldn't do that. I liked the slam, like if you jump really high and you like
Mm-hmm.
do your melee or whatever, you like do a slam. I thought that was cool. I liked the slide. You
Mm-hmm.
could do a little slide. I thought all that stuff was a good ideas and stuff, but their story they just flopped.
So it was the same for me. The story was kind of horrendous, in my opinion. And so I kind of want to discuss with you, because we never really discussed why it was so bad. We just acknowledged it was bad. But we never went into like, details of why it went into bad, because, why do we need to go into details when we both agree it's bad and we'll probably never play it again?
Yeah.
But here in this video, I think I do want to go over why it's bad, and I think I understand why it's bad. And the number one reason is the villains. The villains were just horribly written, horribly. They should have, that type of villain should have never existed in the game.
Think of a YouTube influencer.
Yes.
That was your villain. It was
Um,
cringy. It was cringy. They're like, "Hey, what's up, you?" Basically, it's like, "Hey, what's up, YouTube? This is your boy, blah blah blah." This is. It was just so bad. I was like, I wanted to vomit. It was like cringe.
and so even like putting that aside, right? Even putting aside their like whole cringe YouTube thing, I think what was the biggest problem is that them being villain, they weren't really villains. They were just brats. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
So
you can't even compare them to Handsome Jack.
yeah, so let's just take a look at Handsome Jack as an example, right? Let's just assume that you've never ever played any of the other Borderlands, right? Same thing for Borderlands 2 and same thing for Borderlands 3. Let's just say you play either one of them, right? Without any knowledge of any other games, you don't know anything else, right? Let's just say you start with Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2, you're introduced to Handsome Jack as some kind of, mastermind. He's done some devious things, you know it, right? And the way he talks is he's super cocky but super confident, right? He's a CEO, so he has a lot of money power, right? And he's an unapologetic a-hole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he was well written.
He was an extremely well written character because also he is the villain. You know what I mean? There was like side bosses, like, mini bosses that were like, kind of like heads of bandit, like, head of this faction, head of this faction, but they were never really like the boss. They were very trivial. And another thing is that Handsome Jack got in your way almost as much as possible through like his own means, right? Sending out bots, doing other devious tricks, trying to trick you into doing things. He screwed with a lot of other members. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. You even pick that up throughout the game if you play it.
Yeah, and I think the best example is he talks about how, or it's shown in the game in Borderlands 2, where he kidnaps Mordecai's bird, forgetting Bloodwing.
Bloodwing, yeah.
And it shows just how much of a sadistic maniac that Jack is, right? And the fact that he's willing, that he goes out of his way to inflict, basically mental damage to, those who oppose him. It's not just like, he goes directly just to try and kill him. He wants them to suffer. And so that paints him even in the bigger bad light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get. Yeah, especially I don't even. Well, we've already done the Borderlands 2 videos, but yeah, Bloodwing was a big one, and even to his own daughter Angel in the game.
Yeah. And it's just hard to describe, but there is just this big build up towards Jack being the villain, right? And I think the payoff is worth it because when you finally meet him, you realize he is just a spiny, cowardly man that hides behind a lot of, you know, facades in order to project himself as, a hero. That's another cool thing, by the way, is that he tries projecting himself as a hero to like the residents of Pandora, right? In reality, he's just a, megalomaniac, I guess.
Yeah, he
And
basically tries to convince you he's the good guy.
yeah, and he's a coward, and you've got all this big buildup, and he hides behind so many so many what's it called, strong minions, I guess, strong people like people who are willing to work under him or everything, that. And then when you finally meet him, you beat him up pretty fast in the game. He's not that hard to beat. And then I think the biggest payoff is when you finally defeat him, right? And literally you just one light tap, he dies. He's not some blood hardened warrior that's gone through many battles. He's not some immortal being that's part of an ancient race or anything like that. He's literally just a normal guy, or normal human being technically, that's just a coward that happened to get a lot of power on his hand because he was kind of messed up in the head in the first place.
Yep, I agree with that because even in the pre-sequel, you learn a lot about Jack and why he was so messed up in the head.
Yeah. And so compare that to Borderlands 3, the twins. I think they're called the Callisto twins? Calypso twins. So here you get Calypso twins. The first introduction is they're on a YouTube video. They're like, "Hey!" And they ramble some stuff and that's it. They don't have any direct influence in the beginning of the game. Because in Borderlands 2, Jack literally blows up the train that you're in.
Right from the get-go.
Right from the get-go. He tries murdering you. Here, the twins, they kind of just introduce like, hey, we exist. Yada, yada, yada. We're popular. We have all these bandits under our name. Bow to us. And you as a player, you're just like, who the hell are you to tell me what to do, right? You have all this, like, kind of like, how do you say this? Pizzazz around you, but nothing to tell or show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of like more all talk, and that's really it. There wasn't much else to them.
So right from the get-go, you're kind of just puzzled. You don't even know. You kind of get that they're villains, but if you saw none of the promotions, if you saw none of the promotional artworks, whatever, trailers or anything, you wouldn't even think that they're the actual bad guys. In fact, you would probably think they're the mini boss, at most.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. So the issue is that another big issue I had with the Calypso twins is that they constantly had to remind you that they had all of these bandits under the name. The cult.
Yeah, Children of the Vault.
Yeah, Children of the Vault. And it's just like, okay, I get that, bandits are everywhere, and they're kind of, but then bandit, you have this cult following that are mainly bandits, but it's like bandits are crazy in the first place. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's nothing special or out of the ordinary. It's just more bandits. That's it. But in Borderlands 2, Jack had Hyperion. He had the bots.
He had the whole corporation.
He corporation. Yeah, he ran the corporation. So not only were you going against bandits, you were going against Hyperion. It's a three-way battle, right? Because technically bandits are out against Hyperion too.
Right.
But it's like, there was actual unique factions. Here, there's just only one unique faction, which is you versus the Children of Vault. There's no other third party that makes it more immersive into the world. So already you're just kind of like, okay, well, now I have to go against an army that I'm already facing, so what's the big difference, right? And so the Calypso twins are also just terribly written in the fact that they had no, from my playthrough, right? From my memories of my playthrough through the game, there was no indication or backstory given in order to show why they rose to power outside of we're sirens. That's all. Literally, all I understood is like we're sirens, so we have a cult following. It's like, but why?
Yeah, basically, technically only one was a siren, which was the girl, because only females could be sirens.
Yeah.
And the brother basically kind of just used his sister for power because she could give power.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of his only like relevance was he needed power from her to be useful. Otherwise, he was pretty much the cameraman for her.
Yeah, and going back to like them as villains, was it like you played through the whole story? You might remember, but like, was there actually like a build up to as to why they were like the villains at all? Because in Jack's, like, even in Borderlands 2, without even if you had zero knowledge of the pre-sequel Jack, right? You would still understand how Jack came to power and what his motivation was. But for me, in Borderlands 3, like, there was nothing like that. It literally, the Calypso twins just existed and we're like, hey, we siren.
It was kind of because there was, if I can remember correctly, but I remember later in the game, kind of nearing the end, you kind of tag team with the father, and he's just like, yeah, me and my wife, we were just exploring all these vaults and planets. We had children. We tried to conceal them from life because he knew she was a siren. And then they got older and they basically said, okay, bye, we're leaving.
Wow, that's terrible.
That was kind of it, that I could remember.
That's unremarkable.
They were just like, we hate you, Dad. We're gonna leave you.
I feel like that's like the worst archetype for
like
being villains.
Typical teenager.
Yeah, like the temper attitude, temper tantrum.
Yep.
I think that's like the worst in terms of like story writing, right? In terms of them being the big bad villain, because in the end you're just like, why am I going against a little child?
Yeah, they're pretty immature too, how they're written.
And I think another thing why they just didn't work as villains because there's two of them, the twins, right?
Mm-hmm.
The creators or like the writers of the story had to somehow make the twins work, and they just couldn't make it work because if one twin gets all the attention, then what's the relevance of the other, right? People will start questioning it. So they had to like try and like give relevance to the second one, as you said, right? He kind of just existed to gain powers from the sister. That's the best they can do. They couldn't make him separate from like completely separate character, different from the twins, and make the sister be the main villain. In fact, I feel like it would have been better if the sister was the main villain and the brother was trying to help you along your journey. That would have been a more interesting dynamic,
Yeah, but they wrote them like they were both power hungry.
Yeah, which just didn't mesh well. Because in the end, having one singular big bad guy, I feel like even as a game, right, has so much of a better build up than two people being in that position of power,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it clearly showed because we didn't know who to like focus on, especially when they were being shown as the main villains, right? Who did we focus on? Do we focus on the female? What's the relevance of the male? What do they have? What can they hold? It was just too split up. In Jack, it's more like, what does Jack have up his sleeve? We know he's the big bad guy. is what is he capable of, and we only need to know him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with the twins, you're like, both of them could do equal shenanigans, and is it gonna even be fun for the story, right?
I
And
also think they wrote them to try to relate to a younger audience.
which also did not go well. I feel like a lot of Borderlands 3 players and enthusiasts are well into their adult ages, you know,
Yeah.
mature adult ages, and looking at that kind of attitude coming from the villains copying like the younger, well, quote unquote younger generation with like the whole YouTube and internet lingo, it just threw us off a lot. It was very unappealing, least to say.
Yeah, but if you got past that, I mean, the game was still fun. Like you could still, build overpowered characters. But if you didn't care for the story, I'd say you probably still have fun.
Yeah, so this is just our main again. This is our main gripe with Borderlands 3. It was basically the characters, and there's tons of different issues, but we won't go into them. We'll just say they kind of wrote off a character in a certain way that pissed off a lot of people because it didn't make any sense. And that character is related to a teenager girl you'll meet that also pisses off a lot of people. But at this point, I don't know if we should talk about it because how long has it been since Borderlands 3 came out? Like 3 years now?
I don't
2, 3
remember.
years?
It's been quite a few years, yeah.
I don't know. Should we spoil it?
At this point, yeah, it's been a couple years. Spoilers, if you don't want to hear it, click out of the video now.
And at this point, it's been a couple of years. I don't know why you'd be like, hey, I'm gonna watch a Borderlands 3 video without ever playing Borderlands 3. Like, have some common sense.
Like a walkthrough of it or something.
Yeah. At the very least, the death of Maya. It was bizarre, at least to say.
Oh god, we still have to talk about Ava and her
Shenanigans.
and how people pretty much hated her.
Yes. But let's start with Ava. Actually, Ava. In hindsight, she was written pretty well in the fact that they wrote her like an actual teenager. And the voice actors whoever played her did really well in portraying like a bratty teenager. But because of that, they succeeded in making everyone hate her.
Yeah, I think she was probably the most hated character, even more than the Calypso.
Yeah. And the reason being is because she also acts as a catalyst to what is considered one of the biggest upsets in the Borderlands history, which was Maya's death. And really, if you view it in the overall scheme of things, it almost feels like Ava was literally the only reason why Ava existed was specifically to get Maya killed off.
Yeah, I don't know if it was just because maybe the voice actor for Maya was done with this, so maybe that's why. But I don't really know. But yeah, they basically screwed over a great character for kind of a really hated character now.
And don't get us wrong, deaths of characters just doesn't necessarily mean we will hate the fact that they did it, because in Borderlands 2, Roland died, right? But really, so Roland died because of the causes that the signs were clearly there, right? They were going into an enemy base. They were also he also knew the risks that was involved, right?
Yeah.
And two, they were ambushed. He was ambushed by a cunning man, right? A man who actually was able to deceive, do tricks and, is a coward. So the way that Roland died made sense, right? Shot in the back by a cowardly man, But the way Maya died was literally, it didn't make sense. They tried they literally, I think the writers of Borderlands 3 literally tried replicating what happened to Roland, because I think the Calypso twins literally just showed up out of nowhere and were like, "Hey!"
Yeah, pretty much. They basically waited for after we killed the vault monster so they could collect the reward, and they're like, "Oh, hey, here's Maya, by the way."
Yeah, I think they literally tried replicating the way Roland died.
And also, what I didn't like about the death with Maya was, uh, you knew it was Ava's fault because she was told not to go there, and she showed up anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then she doesn't. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I got her killed." She's like, "It's all your fault. You let her die." I'm like, "If you didn't show up, she wouldn't be dead."
Yeah, I think that
Like,
pissed off a lot of people.
yeah, that part was the part where it pretty much made Ava the most hated character.
The fact that she blames you, right? You as a character, you as a player, for not saving Maya. It was completely her fault, by the way, as Saki mentioned. So that not only that, but people hate it when they get blamed, right? But especially when it's so clear cut as to the reason why this accident or this incident happened, and it's not their fault, and then they get blamed for it. Yeah, you're only gonna piss them off even more, you know. So
Yeah.
not only are players are especially people who play Borderlands 2, right? Not only people get upset by the fact that Maya's dead now, one of the more highly favored characters in the Borderlands series, but two, now they're being blamed for it. Now they have to deal with that, BS that Ava's spitting out, Of course you're gonna piss off everyone. I don't know how the writers thought that was even a good idea.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on when they made this game or writing the story, but it was not good.
And also, it felt like Maya's death had no meaning. You know what I mean? Nothing changed.
You just got a more angry Ava, and then you were like, "Can you kill her off too?"
Yeah, because with Roland, right? He was the leader of the what was it called again?
Crimson
Crimson
Raiders.
Raiders. So suddenly their whole command structure changed. They suddenly were like, "What do we do now?" Right? We lost our commander, and they're scrambling, right? And they didn't even get to have a chance to mourn that. They were like, "We have to move now, or else Jack is gonna do some shit," right? Because Lilith ended up getting captured by Jack too, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, we can't mourn instead. We have to keep it going. This is the life of a soldier, right? And Jack even left behind a message saying, like, if you're listening to this, I'm dead, right? Um, so it made you so like you knew characters cared about him, but it wasn't the right place or time to care about him being dead because you had other things to accomplish that Roland definitely would have wanted you to do first before mourning over him.
Right.
But here, Maya, it's like it literally made zero difference if she died or not. If she lived, there would have been zero difference to the outcome of the story, I feel like.
Yeah, I think because maybe they wanted to. This is just all like speculation, but maybe they wanted to have Maya's powers go to a new person so they could show that off or something. Because they talk about it, but it's never really happened.
And they did eventually show it, right? With, what's her name again? Tannis?
Yeah, but she got Angel's power.
Oh,
She
okay.
died. So Tannis inherited Angel's power when she was killed in Borderlands 2, and then Ava was supposed to inherit Maya's powers when she's, gone. And now that she's gone, I believe she did inherit the powers.
Yeah. And so, also another thing is that, like, I think, Maya and, like, it's because they do, quote unquote, show or talk about the previous Vault Hunters in the Borderlands 2 in Borderlands 3, right? The same way that Borderlands 2 incorporated Borderlands ones, the original Borderlands characters, main cast of characters, into Borderlands 2, right? But the problem is Borderlands 2's Borderlands original cast, which was Brick, Mordecai, Roland, and Lilith, right?
Right.
They were all involved in a resistance against the big bad villains, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
problem with the Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters main cast, which is what were their names? It was Axton, Maya,
Salvador and Zero.
Salvador, and Zero. They weren't really involved with the villains at all. They were just doing their own things. Literally, they were just minding their
Well,
own business, kind of.
technically they all six of the Vault Hunters, if you count Gage and Krieg, they all ended up on the same train for like hunting the vault, except Gage. She was running away because of reasons. There's just lore behind it we can't get to right now, but That's why they were all on that same train for reasons. They were on other planets and they came to Pandora
Hmm.
or for the vault, pretty much.
But like in Borderlands 3, they were just spread out. I mean, Salvador and Axton didn't even show up in the game. They were just mentioned because they had a arena.
Right.
And Zero was just doing his own bodyguard mission or something like that.
Yeah, Zero's doing his own thing. Maya went back to her home planet. Gage was off doing her thing.
Krieg
Krieg was
just
still on
existing.
Pandora. Yeah.
Yeah, just existing. And so it was like they had no reason to go against the villains. You know what I mean? Outside of Maya being attacked, but like even then she rather would just defend her homeland. I feel like that would have been the better option, you know? Stay back in her homeland and defend it. I think she ended up traveling someplace before getting killed, right?
Um,
I don't remember if she was killed on her home planet or not.
she was.
She was. Okay. Oh, it was to go to the vault, right? She like showed the way to the vault or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's slightly understandable, but even then it's like I don't know. It's just like it feels like it was forced, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, that's a lot of gripes I had about, Borderlands 3 story. There's a ton of other little things like, like side characters weren't even that interesting, honestly. Outside of the usual cast of like Sir Hammerlock and Moxie.
Yeah, like the new cast kind of.
Yeah, like none of them are really memorable. Like I forget his name. Who's the lead of one of the corporations?
Reese.
Reese, yeah, and he was the head of
Atlas.
Atlas, right? Yeah, Atlas he wasn't very interesting. He tried being like the suave guy, but he wasn't that.
Well, yeah, it's because he was in the Tales of the Borderlands series, so that's kind of his backstory if you play that game.
Yeah, I never played that game, unfortunately. Um, and there was Mally One who was just a crazy dude. He was weird, but that's about it. Like it wasn't really. He was like almost like a typical villain, if I had to say.
Malawan. Oh yeah. I think I know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
where you're like he admired Zero or something like that, so he copied him.
Katagawa.
Kanagawa, yeah, he just weirded you out more than anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he basically like copied Zero's tech suit.
And he obsessed over Reese. It was just like okay.
Well, he wanted to take over Atlas. That was the thing.
And he admired Reese, didn't he? Like I remember him. He had really actually admired Reese. He was like, "Let's
That
work
I don't
together."
remember.
Because according to Reese, like he literally brought Atlas back from point of bankruptcy or disbandment or something like that. And so
I don't remember.
Katagawa actually admired that. I remember the specific because I remember it just being like, does Katagawa have like a boner for Reese? I just remember thinking that. I was just like, he's so weird in that way. Maybe I'll have to show you later, like their interaction. It's just when you see that, you'll be like, what the heck, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, enough. Outside of that, side characters weren't that really interesting and all that. And I think one of the more, I guess, upsetting things is that Scooter wasn't in Borderlands 3. Because he died
Yeah.
off screen technically.
Or
If you never
no.
played the other Borderlands, Tales of the
Uh,
Borderlands, right?
Yeah, specifically Tales of the Borderlands is where he met his demise.
Fortunately, Tales of the Borderlands I heard was written really well. That's what I
Yeah.
heard. And Scooter's death was, honorable. He went out the best way he could,
Yep.
And so, catch a ride.
Yep. They even mention it a little bit in, I think it was Borderlands 3.
Yeah, but it's just like it was so off screen, If you never played Tales of the Borderlands, you would have been thrown off. You're like, what?
Yeah, I've been like, wait, what happened to him?
Yeah, he was such a beloved character in Borderlands 2, I think, even because he was so funny.
Yeah, you were just like, who's this redneck kind of guy?
Super, but then he's super honest. He's super like how do you say that? I don't know how to describe it. He's super down to earth kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And he's not he has no bad intention, rather. That's why you
Yeah.
like him. But like the fact that he was just killed off, like technically off screen in that sense is that like it just throws you off so much if you've never played Tale of the Borderlands, you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what I disliked. And then, um, can I say? Oh yeah, also the main the Vault Hunters. I just did not care for them in terms of their like identity.
Yeah, they were okay. They weren't as good as, the previous ones.
The only, I guess, quote unquote, interesting one was Zane, but that's apparently because his cousin was Captain Flintlock from Borderlands 2. That's about it.
Yep, Captain Flint from Borderlands 2, yeah.
Or they
He
were
was related.
brothers, right?
Yeah, they were related.
Yeah, that's about it. That's the only interesting I remember. Flack didn't interest me at all. He was just some edgy dude.
Yeah. Well, he was like a robot, wasn't he?
Yeah, robot. Some robot edgy, like the hunt is always on. I'm just like, cool.
Yeah.
And then Mara, was her name Mara?
Amara.
Amara. All I knew is that she was kind of champion, and that's it.
Yeah.
Bose
And
was
then
some kind of like
Rose.
hardened soldier.
Yeah, I forget what military. It might have been Doll.
I think it was Doll. And like all I remember, she was like left for dead or something like that, essentially.
Yeah.
But like they weren't very interesting. If I had to compare it, like Maya as a siren was pretty interesting in Borderlands 2, right? You're like, oh, who's this, right? And then freaking Salvador, he was the most hilarious one out of all of them.
Yeah, I liked Salvador.
Salvador was very interesting because one, he was very short.
Yeah, he was on the shorter side.
Visually, he was also very like drastically different from the rest. I think visually, in terms of Borderlands 2, was the most diverse. Borderlands 3 was kind of muddled. Like, I don't know how to describe it. They weren't just as appealing as they were compared to the Borderlands 2 cast, and especially when they announced no DLC characters.
Yeah, that was disappointing. Because Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel both had DLC characters.
And I think they were all fantastic. Like Krieg, being very interesting. And
Krieg Engage, and then in the pre-sequel it was Handsome Jack and Aurelia.
Yeah, they were all very interesting. And so, yeah, characters didn't really interest me at all. And then gameplay. You said you liked the game. You thought the gameplay was fun, right?
Yeah, the gameplay was still good. Like, that was probably the one redeeming thing about Borderlands 3.
I only had 2 issues with the gameplay, just 2. That's it. The first one being guns.
Oh, how there's way too many?
Way too many. No good identity with guns. In Borderlands 2, there was a healthy mix of legendaries, red text, blue guns, and purple guns, right? There were a lot of unique guns. In Borderlands 3, it just didn't feel like that. It felt like every gun you were getting was like a kind of like a grocery shopping, gun. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there was just, I think, their whole thing was, we're gonna have
Bajillion guns. Bajillions,
And
yeah.
I'm like, that's awful. That just sounds awful, first of all. One, you gotta design that many different types of guns. And it was just awful.
And 2, they didn't even really design every gun. They literally used a generator for that.
Yeah, and then you had to figure out which one was good that week.
Yeah. And so that was bad. And I don't remember and there was no, like, especially with legendary guns, there was no memorable one for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly, I don't remember any legendary guns in that game besides like the old ones they brought back from Borderlands 2.
Yeah, like in Borderlands 2, there was like the Infinity, the was the freaking bazooka, whatever.
The Nukem.
The Nukem, the Nukem. There was a lot of interesting guns there, right? Not in Borderlands 3, just didn't exist. Oh yeah, like in Borderlands 2, conference call, all those certain guns, right?
Yeah.
Borderlands 3, just none. It was too homogenous. Just, yeah, it was boring. And that's part of the reason why it got turned off so much.
I think they tried to do too much.
Yeah, too much. And then the second thing that turned me off was actually, surprisingly enough, skill trees.
I could see that.
And the main reason being is that, like, in Borderlands 1, the way it worked is that you had one defining action skill. And depending on whatever tree you got, your action skill would benefit or change directly because of that, right? But it would be the same exact action skill. So, for example, take Axton or Commando, however better you would like to know him. Take Axton. His main action skill is literally all about his turrets. Nothing changes about that. It's all about his turrets. You don't get anything different from that. Whatever pass you choose, whether it's gun damage, survivability or turret damage, his turret is still one of the main defining factors about, Axton, right? Same thing with any other Borderlands 2 character, which is like, Siren, Maya, all her powers was about phase lock, right?
Yep.
And then Salvador was literally gunzerking. He would go, gunzerking, like he would just go crazy with guns. And Zero was literally about invisibility, stealth. Krieg was about going ham with the buzzsaw. I think that's what it was called.
Yeah, the buzzsaw or buzz axe or whatever.
Yeah, buzz axe. And then Gage was her, what was it?
Death trap.
Death trap, right? But in Borderlands 3, the one thing I didn't like is that you had your action skills, but then there was 3 different ones.
They actually added a 4th.
Oh, so
The purple tree.
Yeah, but in the base game, right? There was.
No, it was in the base game.
Oh, it was in the base game.
It just came out later as an update.
Okay, but like when it first released, I think then, right?
Oh yeah, first release there was only 3, but later down the lines, like maybe a year in, they added a 4th because that's when they announced there weren't going to be any other characters. So they're like, hey, here's an extra skill tree.
Yeah, I didn't even play. I didn't even last that long to play. I played 6 months after the initial release because of this exclusivity, and then it finally released on Steam. And I didn't even last that long to even see the 4th skill tree. So by the when I was playing, I only saw 3, right? And all their skill trees, each action skill did something different, which I didn't like. There was no clear identity to them.
Yeah. Do you mind taking over for a minute? I have to do something very quickly.
Yeah, no problem. So going into that, like I think like I played Zane, right? He was kind of an all-rounder. He had like 3 different ones. One was like a drone. One was like having clones of himself. I don't remember. I was just like, what do I do, right? Do I go this branch? And then apparently you could even change your action skill and go to a different branch. Like I was just like, what on earth am I supposed to do here, right? There's no clear action skill. I don't know what the benefit. I mean, I guess the bonus is that you can do some wacky stuff, but like, what does that do for you as a player identity? And to me, it just came out as, well, nothing. So that turned me off a lot. And I didn't like it. I think the only consistent one was Moe's. So I'm gonna have to ask Saki when he comes back about that. But yeah, I just had so much issue with, and like, it didn't feel like, I don't know. It didn't feel like when you were leveling up your skill trees, it didn't feel that rewarding compared to Borderlands 2. That might be just because I have a more bias towards oops, sorry. That might be because I have a bias towards Borderlands 2. But yeah, it just wasn't that fun. As Saki mentioned earlier, there was a lot of nice updates though, like shared loot versus individual loot. That was a really nice update. That you didn't have to like worry about loot having to be spread out. And another good one was the whole the ledge climbing, the sliding, the ground smash. Those were all fantastic updates that like I feel like that was good. But because, as Saki mentioned earlier, what's it called? Borderlands 3 tried doing too many things, and some of them were good, some of them were bad. So yeah, it was just that's just how it was. And oh gosh, never mind. I was thinking of a different Borderlands game. It's more in relation to a different. It was in relation to a spinoff called Tiny Tina's.
I'm back. It's Tiny Tina's Wonderlands.
Wonderlands, right? Yeah, that was the spinoff standalone game.
Yes.
Yeah, it was just I just remember something from there, but it's a completely different story. But anyways, going back to Borderlands 3. But yeah, I just felt like there was no clear identity to the characters because of so many different like action skill options,
Yeah, I think they rushed it maybe, and it was just too complicated.
Made it too complicated. Yeah. But yeah, basically and then you may criticize me for you can criticize me for being like, well, you didn't play through the whole game, like why on earth are you criticizing the gameplay, like the story and everything. It's like, well, I feel like I should be able to criticize it because of the predecessor of Borderlands 2, right? And my experience with Borderlands 2, and the fact that I could not enjoy myself to even bring myself halfway through the game of Borderlands 3 is kind of telling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, I do want to add their DLCs were just okay.
Hmm.
Like I played through the game, as much as Borderlands 2. I don't know why I did that to myself, but I played every character, beat the story, did all the DLCs on every character, and honestly, the DLCs were just okay. I
Yep.
don't think they were anything special, really.
You heard it here. I can't comment on the DLCs because I never got to them.
Yeah, especially the last like DLC slash update was the arena thing.
Hmm.
It was basically you want good guns, grind for it, have fun. And
Yikes.
it was yeah, you'd play through it, take you like maybe 10 minutes cuz it's basically endless, and then once you go to the boss and beat him, then you're done. But if you want guns, you have to, fight your way through, and if you want to take them with you cuz there's these little deposit box, and then it'll transfer outside of the arena. But if you didn't put it in that box, you didn't not get to keep it. But
Gosh.
there was four of the boxes, which was nice, but they were literally on like the four corners of the map. So if you were in one corner, or, like in the middle, you gotta like run like for a couple minutes just to get to the box.
That just does not sound fun.
Yeah, it really wasn't. Also, if you wanted to get to one, you kind of had to unlock some areas too. Like you had to fight your way through a couple like hordes of enemies, and then like the gate will unlock, and then you can get through. It was just weird.
I also just remembered another thing that I didn't really like about Borderlands 3 is that the quests were not really rewarding.
No, not really. You
Like
get some money.
in Borderlands 2, they would like occasionally give you unique guns that were actually pretty good. They're not legendaries, but like they had their own unique, identity and like, unique playstyle with each gun, right? And so it felt rewarding to do those quests. In Borderlands 3, I don't remember any quest being rewarding.
I don't either, to be honest.
I don't even remember doing the quest because either they
Except
were
maybe Mark.
required or they gave EXP. That's it.
I would say Moxie's, you get like I guess something decent, just because usually when you get a Moxie mission, you get one of her guns, which are pretty good.
Yeah. But yeah, I just don't remember anything from quests being rewarding. But yeah, I guess that should wrap up, our complaints about Borderlands 3. We ended up complaining for a very long time. Well, mainly me, because I had a lot to rant about it. But if you think that Borderlands 3 is a great game, good for you. I'm not gonna, hard disagree or anything. It's just my opinion and my experience with it. And I won't disagree. I won't say it's a terrible game outright, or I won't say it's a bad game. I think it's a decent game, but it doesn't live up to, again, Borderlands 2, which I'm, more biased towards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's still a fun game, but it could have been way better.
Yeah, it's just the unfortunate potential that it never happened. So, I'll end the episode here. So, I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And this is The Casuals, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.